You are listening to Eastmans Fly Cast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastmans Fly Cast for you. So today on the podcast, I have on Tyler Palmerton. I met Tyler through an Eastman's contact, Brandon Mason, and Tyler's a diehard fly fisherman. He's made his living at different times in the fly fishing industry, although he no longer does, but he's worked as a guide in Montana and Alaska, and he's got a great knowledge of the history of fly fishing. We connect and we talk about some of these rivers that are right around me. He went to college up at MSU, and so he fished all these rivers in his youth, and so we kind of compare notes to the modern day to the old day, but it just made for a great conversation. We talk different tactics. We talk beating the pressure. We talk small systems. We talk Alaska. It just made for this great, authentic conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think you guys are going to enjoy it too. I want to thank my sponsor for today's show, Avid Max. Avid Max offers absolutely everything you need for fly fishing. They've got a great internet site, and they have a great bug selection. They've got rods, reels, fly tying material, boots, waders, nets. They've even got camping gear. They've got a great clearance section. They have everything you need to outfit yourself for a huge adventure or fishing close to home. Avid Max also has an in-store location right around Denver, and whether you're ordering from the internet or in person, they've got a great knowledgeable staff that can help advise you for what you need for fly fishing around your hometown. So thanks to Avid Max, we appreciate the support. And with that, man, I've been fly fishing a bunch here. It's been a great spring. I just love chasing these different rivers in the springtime and getting busy with girl sports and things, and rivers are starting to mud up. I saw Yellowstone was muddy yesterday as I was driving through, and Madison is definitely on the rise, although it's still clear. But yeah, it's been super fun. Been chasing good dry fly hatches I've been catching in the evening. Yeah, I've been getting them on this size 18 Betas and watching these big trout come up. Like I've talked about it before in the podcast last season about that magical hatch I found where those fish were sitting in that run and they were eating dry flies and all I had was my streamer rod. Well, I've been to that system and tried to time it right this year, and I've got it 4 or 5 times with great hatches. Everybody leaves and they come off in the evening, and they're these I think last year I saw like a blue wing olive hatch. This year it tends to be more Baetis mayflies, but they've been coming off, and these great big browns have been sipping these things, and I'm just down there with the right pattern feeding them. So it's just been an absolute blast. I've got a good dry fly podcast coming up 2 weeks with Mike Green where I kind of talk about it, and he's a great dry fly fisherman, so made for a great podcast as well. But yeah, just been super fun chasing that around, and yeah, just getting busy now trying to keep up with work and everything else I've got going, and bear season and that. But man, still some good fly fishing to come for this spring and this summer. Super excited. It's been fun exploring all these systems. So hopefully you're getting out doing some fishing and enjoying yourself. But let's get into this podcast. It's Tyler Palmerton, Eastmans Fly Cast. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Here we go.
It came up with the no caller ID, so I was hoping it was you or that, or it was the NSA reaching out to me.
Yeah, that or somebody trying to sell you an extended warranty on your truck.
Yeah, that's very true. That's a good thing I sold off my truck. I'm in the process of getting a new one right now, so that's a good thing.
Ah, good for you. So I met you, Tyler, through Brandon Mason and through Eastmans, and he introduced me to you. And so you've been working in the fly fishing industry for years now, and also have a passion for fly fishing. So where are you located now, Tyler?
I'm in the Pacific Northwest, from Oregon originally, but I live up near Vancouver, Washington now.
Oh, right on. And the fly fishing world is keeping you busy. It's been hopping here lately, huh?
Yeah, it's really busy for those shops in particular. Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about it beforehand, but think COVID really put, a lot of people in the outdoors and increased it with the fly fishing business as well. So those people are absolutely slammed 24/7, especially the guys that do both in-story and online as well.
Yeah. Man, oh man. Yeah, it's sure gotten popular and it's kind of wild. Like with fly fishing and with bow hunting, when you're doing it, you like to be the only boat or the only person in the mountains or have it to yourself. There's something about that's really nice. But, that's just not the way our conservation model works. It's where all of us have the opportunity to get out on the public waterways and public ground and such. But there's still great fishing out there and great rivers to fish. It's almost just a change in perception. And I know I live on one of the busiest rivers around, the Madison, and you actually grew up around here, right?
Well, I really grew up there, but I did spend a lot of time there from my teenager years on, and then I lived there in Livingston and Bozeman, 1995, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2000, and then I know it really well. I mean, I cut my teeth, started out as guiding in Montana in 1996, 95, I think. No, 96. So it was a long time ago. But,
oh, that's right.
Yeah,
it was your college years, right?
Yeah. I went to college in Powell, Wyoming, actually, and then I ended up bumping up to Wyoming into Montana because I had a lot of friends from Livingston. And so I just fell in love with that part of Montana, southwest Montana, and I trampled around those rivers from the Yellowstone to the Boulder to the Stillwater, out to the Spring Creeks. I used to be able to get on those things for just about nothing in Paradise Valley, and then Bozeman was kind of like the next stopping point along the way. And it was pretty tiny back then. I know there was a Costco that just opened, and I think that was 1998 maybe, and it was the only thing on South 19th. So there's nothing out there but farms and at the very end, and that's it in Costco. So as a young fishing guy, you look back at that and say, wow, I wish I had a bunch of money, could have bought a bunch of farmland. So it's that farmer's sitting pretty, that's for sure, or the family is nowadays. But I spent a lot of time fishing in Montana. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. If we all would have invested in a bunch of this property, we'd be done and fishing every day now. But how cool, dude. Like, I got here in 99 is when I showed up in southwest Montana. So I can't imagine, like, the heydays in the 90s, like, what you had to fish and some of the fish you saw, like, out of those systems that you're talking about and the spring creeks in Paradise Valley and Yellowstone and Boulder and Stillwater. My buddy Dylan Ness, who's been on the podcast before, he lives over in Billings and fishes that Stillwater quite a bit, and it's still good fishing. He told me the other day he took his father-in-law down there and they just got him good down there. So like all these rivers, they still fish good. There's just there's just more guys doing it, and so you got to be a little craftier with your floats. And like a lot of this fly fishing and fishing these rivers, and I'm not sure if it was this way in the 90s, but almost you start planning your fishing day around some of the fishing pressure, like where you're going to put in, you kind of plan where these guide days are going to do their 8-hour float, and you can put in 2 or 4 hours in front of them and get kind of fresh water. Was it that way in the 90s? Did you even have to think about fishing pressure in the 90s?
I would say probably, on maybe. So there are certainly certain sections that were on the Madison that were always busy no matter what. The Yellowstone is such a big river that, you never worried about that at all. Especially, you're just out fishing for fun. I never worried about that at all. And even nowadays, I think that your perspective is for a lot of people, but I look at it from a different point of perspective. I look at it from the old saying is, 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish. And so I would be, it might sound arrogant or cocky enough, but if there were a lot of boats in front of me, I could care less. I'm like, well, I'm still going to catch a fish. I'm going to catch more fish, probably, and I'm not really necessarily always worried about fresh water. Sometimes, the more boats go over them, the more they stir them up. But I look at more time of day. and the water temperatures, where the sun's at, stuff like that. So I could care less if there was, 100 boats in front of me, unless they were fishing bait. And then it's a different story. So, if you're fishing bait and you're behind those guys, especially steelhead fishing, it's a different mindset, but you're going to have a tough time trying to get steelhead behind guys that are fishing bait, especially guys that know what they're doing. But, those rivers are, pretty special to spend a lot of time on. And I think, to bring back to your point, the crowding and stuff like that. I mean, sometimes, you just walk a little farther, go a little farther, go a little farther than you typically would if you're walking and hiking, and then try not to fish on the weekends and stuff like that. And, and those fishing guides, I mean, those guys make a living and it's good for them. They need to do it while they can. They have a short season, especially over in the Rockies. They only got about 4 months to make all their money, for the summer. So, I typically would just find my own stretch of water and hang out, and if fishing sucked, I just walk. I walk a lot.
God, it's the best attitude to have too, Tyler. It's you can let it bother you or worry about your shuffling boats, and I don't like to be in a boat parade, but if I am, I'll just let those boats go down and I'll give it an hour and relax. And like you said, 10% of the fishermen catch 90% of the fish. I know that guys aren't going to be able to make the cast that I'm making, and they're also not fishing the way I'm fishing, and those guides are really knowledgeable and they catch a lot of fish. But the reality is the guys in the front of their boat don't live and die behind that fly rod like I do. I can make those real tough casts that nobody else can make, or just like you were saying, like fishing skill, and it may be a bit of arrogance, but I know that I can get my mends and get my drifts. I know, where the fish sit off the drop off or off the bank line or those middle buckets or, whatever the case is. And so you're right. You can't always get caught up in that. And I do get caught up in a little bit. You can kind of hear it when I was describing it to you, as I do think about boats and how they're putting on. But a lot of times that's just built into my game plan. And like you said, sun position, timing of hatches, guides usually start out their day at 8 in the morning. Some start out at 6 in the morning, but really, the bugs don't start coming off till 10 in the morning. So if I can put on at 10, even during the busiest times of the year in the salmon fly hatch, if the bugs are coming off and the fish eating them, it doesn't matter how many people are on the water. You're just going to get them, And so I like your perspective on that, where you build it into your game plan, but you don't worry and stress about it all day. Like you're on the river to have fun. Just relax and have fun and fish the section you're in.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly. I mean, I got down the chute for a number of years as well, here in Oregon, and that thing was a flotilla a lot of times on the upper section because there's not a lot of boat launches on there, and especially during the salmon fly hatch. And then you would get a lot of DIY guys that are doing on their own. And you get the pontoon boat parade of all those guys, and they're outcasts and their bucks bags, pontoon boats. So you incorporate that into there with guides, and then do DIY guys, and it gets really crowded. And I was just a lot of times you just wait. If you have people that are willing to, instead of putting on at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're off by 4:35. Fishing decent, always better in the evening anyways. Just put on at noon or 11. It depends on the clients, if I had clients that were really good anglers and did stay out late and they didn't mind getting back to their hotel room until midnight, then by all means, stay out later because fishing was better. But I do see it the other way too. I know a lot of people are on kind of a schedule there. They want to be on there 8 to 4 off back at home in time, and I never fit that mold at all.
Man, that's a good approach. Yeah, I do a bunch of steelheading as well, like out on the Olympic Peninsula. Of course, those Idaho rivers are close to me, but I grew up in Olympia, Washington, so I grew up 2 hours away from the Olympic Peninsula. So every year I go back for 2 weeks or so and go fish for steelhead. I love fishing for the ghost. So we definitely have that in common. And it's just getting out and getting your swats at them. And I like what you said, like the off timing, like just being smart about your game plan. And that evening, the evening is the best time to catch fish throughout the summer, like on the busiest rivers, and everybody takes off at 4 or 5 o'clock. And so, my typical salmon fly hatch on the Madison here is to work throughout the day and then be putting on at 4 or 5 o'clock and get that evening drift. And you can find some of the most insane fishing and never see a boat just because you're on those off hours. And like I've got this system that sits close to my house now where I've caught a couple dry fly hatches in the past week with these betas coming off. That's just been insane, chasing these 20-inch like wolf pack trout, these brown trout. But you show up in the middle of the day at 1, 2 o'clock and there's 10 trucks in the parking lot. But if I show up at 4 or 5 o'clock, there's nobody in the parking lot. And then if you catch that overcast day, those hatches start come off and those fish just slide over into those eating positions and just start going off. And it's just been insane fishing. So you're right. You just gotta. There's a lot of people out recreating, but you just gotta get your own experience out there and make your own game plan. And there's still so much great fishing to be had. And I see like the popularity of the Madison. And there's so many boats coming to this river day in, day out. So it's like getting it off season or off hours on this river. But then on these other days, there's so many systems that are within an hour of my house. The Big Hole, the Beaverhead, the Yellowstone, the Missouri, and you may not catch as many as you will in the Madison, but you can go find your own experience and find some epic fishing out there. There's so much to be had. So yeah, you can't get caught up in the pressure and caught up in the competition with other guys. You just got to go out and go have a good drift.
Yeah, I particularly in that part of Montana, there's a lot of water to fish. And you add in the creeks. There's a lot of places to go. It's funny that when I talk about creek fishing in Montana, that my friends that are from Livingston, that were born and raised in Livingston, they never even fished the Yellowstone ever. They could care less. They lived. I have buddies that lived on it. Actually, had two ranches, good friends that lived right on the Yellowstone. One lived in Paradise Valley, and the other one lived just south of or just east of town, going towards Big Timber around the river. And they could care less. But if you talked about going fishing, they were going to go fish creeks, and they were going to go fish Mill Creek, and they were going to go fish Pine Creek, and they were going to go fish, any others that they had access to throughout the years. But Mill Creek was usually kind of the holy grail. It was only locals fishing it, and they used to fish it with a truck. They put the truck up, and they start very, very high up, and then it was like leapfrog. 5 of us would hop out of the back of the truck and just walk down the creek, just fish it, and then whoever was last would run all the way back up and grab the truck and bring it all the way back down. And it was so they have a different mentality. A lot of native Montanans do. A lot of my friends never fished those rivers. And so it's kind of funny that most people want to go fish those rivers, which are great. But if you did a lot more somewhere, you'd find some really cool places to go.
It's us as humans, we're explorers by nature too. I love fishing new systems, and those small creeks that you talk about, they're like the hidden gem of Montana, and there isn't much guiding on them. A lot of times you can have the whole system to yourself, and some of these, even like mid-size, like the Ruby or the Boulder, or there's so many of these things, and like what's the other one I'm thinking of? That dumps into the Yellowstone there right past Livingston before Big Timber. That's another good one. But yeah, the Shields, that's what I was thinking of, which is a great brown trout fishery. And nowadays, like hiking that riverbank like you guys were doing, you can really work that water. And then also with like the advent of these single man crafts and these the fly crafts, where you can fish 2 guys out of it, you can cover a tremendous amount of water and never see another fly fisherman in the middle of summer. And there's some big trout that get to grow up in those systems too. It's not, there is the adage, the bigger the system, the bigger the fish. And I do love fishing the Yellowstone because it's a big system. But in that same breath, like those little rivers have such a great ecosystem and bug life here in Montana that you can grow an absolute giant in these small systems. In fact, I've started fishing this small system that I think the fish are oversized in there. Like the big fish tend to average 20 to 24 inches, and I've actually caught more big fish out of that system than I have the Yellowstone this year or out of the Madison this year because it's not fished as much, and those fish can grow up. And, they can be real finicky in those systems, but man, is it fun when you tie into them.
Oh yeah, I love that. Sounds awesome. I'd love to do something like that. I love exploring new water. Like you just said, you hit the nail on the head. We are explorers by nature, and I'd love to do it. Even if I fish the river, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and somebody said, hey, you want to go fish here, or you want to go try this new spot that I've been looking at on the map or something else, I'd like to go see a new spot. It's in my nature as well. But I think back in the day, that part of Southwest Montana, it's always been a holy grail, especially since River went through it, really publicized it in the 90s, and all those fly shops started booming and stuff like that. And then you had a lot of tourists obviously come in, and the fish could handle it. I think that's one difference between, fishing and hunting is that, fishing to put and take, right? And so you can put it in the system, or I should say it's not a put and take, but it's a put and put back basically, right? So you can have hatchery systems that release hatchery fish, and a lot of people, will put them back. And, where on the hunting side, obviously there's no way to do that. So, the overcrowding on the fishing side doesn't bother me as much as being in the mountains. That's overcrowded, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's just still opportunity. I love the public land game, and I can't get away from it, whether that's hunting or whether that's fly fishing, because I love that, everybody has that opportunity. I love me just like this average carpenter that gets to go out and have these experiences on these wild rivers that doesn't have to pay a guide or an outfitter, that I can go explore it myself. I just think it's such a great opportunity, and there is still insane fishing around Montana, even made popularized by the river runs through it. And I've been talking to some guys that are like the first generation guides here on the Madison, and they talk about the river runs through it, that it really made this divide through town from the bait fishermen that used to go fish sculpin and worms down the river to now this fly fishing fad that got really popular. And there was almost this division in town between the two groups or whatever, but they also used to kill and keep all their fish too. There was limits. They kept and ate them, and now with the advent of catch and release, it's these systems can sustain this pressure, and so it's a good model, and it's still working here in Southwest Montana. And then you take into account like the stillwater, which I've gotten more into, is fishing these stillwater, because fish can really grow up in these lakes, and there's hardly any fly fishing pressure on these lakes. Like, sure, Ennis Lake, middle of the summer, you can get some boats, but there's so much square footage or square miles of that open lake, and it's a bit of more of a black magic on these lakes of trying to figure it out and catch these fish consistently. And like right now in the spring, we're getting the ice off. Like, I'm waiting for some lakes that I really like for the ice to come off, and I got a good stillwater on the last couple weeks with a buddy where, gosh, I threw a streamer in there, and I hooked a 15-incher off the first cast, and then there was two 24s that were trying to eat my 15-incher on my line. Like, they are so hungry right now, and there was nobody fishing that stillwater on public ground. So you just got to be creative and make a game plan, and when you're exploring, you also strike out. Like, that's part of the game. Like, you don't always find the fish. You don't always find epic fishing. You have to put your days in. But you have to have the bad experiences, or not even bad experiences, but you just have to put your time in to see that epic day where that hatch goes off, or that epic day where they're eating those streamers, And so you just keep putting in your time, you keep theorizing, you keep checking out these different systems, and eventually you hit that pay dirt,
Yeah, there was a quote that was a number of years back. I think it was in Kirk Eater's book called Castwork. And it's about they're black and white books, really cool, about a lot of fly fishing guys. And they're guys from the Rockies, Northern Rockies, Southern Rockies, out where I'm at, in Oregon, Idaho, Washington, stuff like that. And Terry Gunn was quoted, who owns, police ferry angler on the Colorado River. And Terry's wife, Wendy, are great people, very well respected in the fly fishing industry, and former Alaska fly fishing guides as well, way back in the day when it was really good. And Terry's quote was still one that I just love. I just love it because it's kind of what everything evolves to in life, you know. And he said that you know, when you first start out fly fishing, you just want to catch fish, and then you know you want to catch the most fish on the trip. And then as you start to progress, you just care about catching the biggest fish. And then after you've caught the biggest fish, you kind of circle back and you don't really want to catch fish. You just want to watch other people learn how to catch fish. And I've been at that point in, you know, in my life, you know, for a long time. I really care less about catching a lot of fish anymore than the biggest fish. I just want to be on the water, and I like to see other people, you know, that haven't had those experiences that I have. And so I think that that's something that everybody can learn from, you know, and especially if you spend as much days as I used to do on the water. Granted, I don't do it as much, but, you know, I used to fish over about 250 days a year, 260 days a year,
wow,
between guiding and fishing.
Yeah.
You know, and that was kind of the life, right? So, it's, and if you want to learn to be, very, very good, and to be a good, you know, good fisherman, to be a good caster, to learn all that stuff, you got to put your time in it like anything else. And it's a good way to go broke. I'll tell you that much.
Be broke, but have a lot of fun.
Oh man, yeah, we could talk about this for hours. I have more stories from all the years from being a fly fishing guide that they're pretty hilarious. But I think that was always the romanticism, you know, with fly fishing, is that it was so beautiful, and I think that's one of the things that people don't do well today, is that they just take it for granted, you know, and they don't practice casting, and they just go out and think they can just, you know, go out and throw a rod 20, 40 feet and catch fish and think it's great. And, you know, and more people should practice casting and learn how to cast and spend time, you know, in your yard casting, and go out to a football field and cast, you know. And I did that since I was, you know, pretty young, and I still do it. And casting fly rods is fun, like shooting arrows, you know, shooting a bow, the same deal. It's kind of addicting, you know, and once you get that kind of mastered, it certainly makes the fly fishing side a lot easier. You know, there's no substitute for time on water at all. There's not, you know, and I think that's where I made the joke of going broke, because I literally did. I think like a lot of young fly fishing guides, you know, I put every ounce of money that I had back into gas, sleeping in the vehicle, and sleeping on friends' couches, and just learning rivers, and learning how to fish and where to fish, and, you know, where you can trespass, where you can't trespass, and you know, and those days certainly are good memories, that's for sure.
Oh, man. Yeah, you couldn't be more spot on, Tyler. Experience is the best teacher. Like, you can shorten the learning curve by reading or listening to podcasts and know what more to expect, but really it's time on the water. There's no substitute for it. Experience is the absolute best teacher out there. And I love that adage that you said, and I've heard that said a couple different ways, but you know, you're right, the progression of a fly fisherman, wanting to catch a lot, wanting to catch a big one, and then I've heard it like then just enjoying the experience. And I'm kind of in between the wanting to kill a big one or wanting to catch a big one and enjoying the experience. But you know, catching a big fish, a 25-inch fish, is the exception, not the rule. And you may have 20 days, 40 days, 50 days into trying to catch a brown trout like that. So if you're only having fun when you catch a big trout, you're missing it. You're missing the boat. Like, it's about enjoying the experience in your time on the water. You have to enjoy the entire process. Every day you're out, take in the views, take in the fishing, and you're on the water and learning, you know. And so, yeah, I think I'm kind of in between those two, as I am really into enjoying the process the days I get on the water. But I still, like, what excites me and gets me up in the morning are chasing those big brown trout, or even chasing, you know, that epic fishing, catching that, you know, like I've been catching these Baetis hatches where, you know, I maybe not catch 50 fish, but, you know, catch 10 quality fish a night off a dry fly and watch them come up and eat this thing. And then, you know, on 4X, it's a really good fight on those things to get them to the net, And so, but I think you made a really good point that, we have to enjoy our time out and enjoy the experience, and that's kind of where my progression of fly fishing has got as well. And I also like what you said about casting, like working on casting. Like for steelhead, spey rod casting is such a major portion of it. I had so much fun learning how to spey cast, and then like single hand rods, I'm amazed. Like some really good fishermen that I fish with don't know how to double haul a fly rod. And it's like a double hauling in the wind here in the Madison is absolutely crucial to getting your fly where you want it, And so, and that's stuff that you just can't teach in one day. Like I can show somebody how to do it, but to get better at it, you have to practice it day in, day out in your yard, on the river, and where I really got like where I learned my double haul at. Like you do it a little bit in fly fishing, and now I use it all the time to cast against the wind. But you go to the flats and you start hunting those fish, hunting tarpon, hunting bonefish, permit, and that. Like, man, you don't just double haul out there. They want you to double haul and grab that line and throw it down to your ankles. Like it is a huge double haul to be able to throw that cast where you want it. And so, that was some of the experiences that really sharpened my skills and opened my eyes to the power of a double haul, So now on the Madison, when the wind's blowing 20, 25, I can get that fly anywhere I need it because I know how to double haul. But guys that haven't put in that work or haven't dedicated themselves to the craft, they're just almost handicapped out there when they're fishing in the front of the boat because they can't throw against that wind, So there's so many crucial skills out there that are learned through experience, just like you're saying.
Yeah, one of the old quotes from River Runs Through It was one that I always remember, when Norman McLean is telling the story. He says that no man should be allowed to disgrace a fish if he first doesn't know how to catch a fish. And that's what I see all the time nowadays, is that people just don't know how to cast. And it just, I think it kind of bothers me sometimes when I'm like, you should go learn it and spend time casting because it would make your life a lot easier, and learning how to double haul, from different angles too, from the sidearm to, towards vertical over your head, casting backwards across shoulder, like I can cast over my left shoulder and flip it back the other way. I can cast left-handed, right-handed, but nowadays that seems to be a lost art anymore, and in the 90s it was still, there were still casting competitions. They still had the famous Golden Gate Casting Club in San Francisco, with all the ponds, and, there were still people that take pride in that. That's all they do. Those people don't have a lot of fishing, around San Francisco for fly fishing. There's striped bass and stuff like that in the Delta, I think in Sacramento, but that casting was an artwork, and that place would be packed. That park would be, there'd be hundreds of people down there casting the fly rods. And those people were always a joy when you actually got them in your boat. You got them down to Alaska, because you could tell right away that, I'm a member of the Golden Gate Casting Club. I'm like, you're fine. I'm like, yeah, dude, those guys can put it just about anywhere they want. A lot of them. They might not be the great fishermen, but boy, they can cast. And those were fun times. Watching Joan Wolf in her 80s. She'd come out to one of the big fly fishing shows, like the San Mateo Sportsman Show, and she'd get on the pond and cast, and it was pure artwork, And it was a big deal in the 50s, 60s. There was a party. People would go cast fly rods, and nowadays it's all about instant gratification, right? It's all about, I caught this fish, or, this is what I did to catch this fish, and this is what I did to catch that fish, and I think it's pure art when you watch them cast.
Ooh.
It's really good.
I like that, Tyler. Pure art, because that's a really good way to describe it. And yeah, nowadays, the guides are so good that they know the runs down the river where, and nothing against nymph fishing, but, they can throw a bobber out, and then that guide can chase that bobber around the river and fish it just how he wants to fish it without hardly any casting skill. But where that shines is when it gets to be technical fishing. So we talked earlier about 10% catching 90% of the fish because you're able to put those casts in the right places. You're able to put your men's in the right line at the right places. And so the technical fishing around here, the salmon fly hatch, there'll be 100 boats in any one section, and the big 3-inch dry flies come off. And so, but the high water, we're just getting through runoff, and so the high water pushes those fish into the bank lines. And so, whether it's the Henry's Fork, the Madison, whether it's the Big Hole, which I all fish for salmon flies and chase that hatch around, because the biggest fish in the river really key into that bug and eat it. And but they're sitting in these lines that can just be underneath willow brush and up against the bank line. And so it's such a technical cast, such a precision cast to be able to put it 2 inches from the bank line and get a mend into it and run it all the way down that seam line down there. And that's where a big 25 might come up and eat that dry fly. But 90% of the fishermen out there can't make that cast because they haven't dedicated themselves to the craft and to learning it, and like you said, it's not just casting in the wide open, it's being able to cast those sidearm ones, being able to skip it underneath brush and get it up in there. So you just have to, to dedicate to the craft and to casting and to mending and to fishing. Experience is the best teacher, but the better you get, the more proficient you get at making those really, fishing those technically tough rivers, like the payoff is immense no matter how many people are on the river, because you can just make that cast and make that drift. And that is my absolute funnest fishing. I just love that technical fishing where you're just throwing, like some of those just back it, like the Big Hole's really technical with all this overhanging brush, and the water runs this tea color, and the water's running so fast that you get one shot into that run, and it's a high pressure shot where, not that you're waiting all day to make that cast, but there's a fish living in there, and you got one chance to get your cast and your drift in there, and if you mess it up, he won't eat it. But if you get it just right and just perfect, you may find magic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's magic is good, and I think that the other thing we always have too is that 90% of the fish eat on the bottom. So I always would say dry fly fishing to me is the easiest thing. If you know what you're doing and you know how to cast, and you can, matching the hatch is hard enough as it is. Maybe they're hitting the mergers, the guns, adults, stuff like that. But to be a really good nymph fisherman takes a lot of skill, and to do it correctly takes a lot of skill, and especially when you fish big rivers like the Chutes where I used to guide at. If you were a good nymph fisherman from the morning to the middle of the day, even when the salmon flies were coming off, they weren't, a handful of fish when eating at certain times of the day, mostly in the evening. A good nymph fisherman could do really well, and doing really well in the Chutes back in the day was, 10 fish, 12 fish. You usually, and that's with a skilled angler. You usually didn't see anybody that would ever catch more than a dozen of those red tides. But if you were to try to go on there all day, just fish your eyes on a stream like that, a big river, you might not catch anything until Friday, right when the bugs are going off. So, I learned that early on. Being able to read water is the key, and being able to understand, nymphs and how they bounce along the rocks and different sizes, and then you have, different attractive ones as well. And a lot of that comes probably back to where I grew up fishing on the Rogue River for steelhead as well. So, you could go to the Rogue River where I grew up in Southern Oregon, and you could cast with a spray rod if you want to, and you could cast, the green dot skunk, you could throw any traditional steelhead fly, and the chances of you catching a steelhead on that river doing that traditional method are really slim. But if you had somebody come by that knew how to use nymphs and had the right flies and stuff like that, he might catch 10, 12, and he's still on that river in a day. And that river's different because of the way the structure and the rocks and the boulders and lava rock and everything else. But every river has its own kind of path, and that it cuts its course, and there's just ways to catch fish and there's ways to not. I think that even nowadays, especially fishing in Montana, granted I don't fish in Montana as much as you do because I don't live there, but if I did, I'd fish it a lot still. And, I still don't, I don't see a lot of people that effectively know how to run nymphs and long line nymphing, what we call slack line nymphing, which is, I could roll cast mostly, 60, 70 feet. And you have these long drifts with 2 or 3 flies, and you can cover, giant sections of water, and you can leave it in the river and just walk with it, and if you know how to do that, like on the Chutes River, then you're going to catch fish. But if you don't know how to do that, you're going to have a tough time pulling fish out of there.
Oh, I love that, Tyler. So I'm a technical nympher from way back. I learned the art of nymphing, and it's technical, right? Because you're messing with leader length, you're messing with weight, and then it's not only just running a nymph setup, it's being able to set up your drift, like you say, to be able to cover water, and it's revolutionized steelhead fishing. So I love getting them on the swing, and I stop and I swing runs with my spey rod, but we've actually come up with a floating line and running a nymph setup on these switch rods and on these spey rods, and we fish them going down out of the boat and fish these runs out of there using technical nymphing. And those steelhead just love to eat technical nymphs or a dead drift nymph, and same with the trout around Montana. Like it's this lost art form or skill that people kind of put their nose up at. They want to fish a dry fly or they want to fish a streamer, and they never put in the time to get proficient at nymphing, which it's such a necessary skill, and it's the most effective way to catch trout. It is so effective to run those different lines and to dissect that water, running close drifts under your rod tip all the way out, and to be able to, like you say, roll cast anywhere. Or I use my spey cast a lot, even with single hand rods where I don't have any back cast. But the real art of it is a true dead drift. They want to eat it on that dead drift, not moving, because anytime you get any line pull, that indicator moves at all, it pulls those bugs off the bottom, and also pulls them downstream where it's unnatural and those fish don't want to eat it. But if you're a good nymph fisherman, you throw it upstream, throw a roll cast at it, or sometimes you're just stripping back till it gets even with you, and then really getting those big mends that throw all the way to the indicator and stage your line upstream. But you want to throw a hard enough mend that it takes all your line and throws it up above your indicator. But if you throw it too hard, then it picks up your indicator and picks your bugs off the bottom, and you lose about 5 foot of that drift. But I've been fishing with really good fishermen before, going after steelhead, and I take these guys, but they're streamer guys and dry fly guys that never put in the time nymphing, and even though they're guides and they fish their client with nymphs a lot, they don't understand the process. And we go down steelhead fishing, and I'm fishing them in the same runs that I'm fishing, and you'll outfish them 5-1 or even 6-1, and they're using the same bugs, same leader length, same weight. It's all in that technical drift, getting those mends where you need it. And you said it best, like being able to run long drifts, like roll cast that one way up in front of you, and then like the biggest trick with nymphing that I see are like that extended drift, like being able to fish way down below you. And that comes from staging up your drift, like I say, setting up that line above it, and then you can fish it, and you can fish it 100 feet below you, 150 feet. Like I'll fish all the way down to my backing down below me. I'm using every bit of my fly line to cover that water, and then you have to be really good at the hook set as well. But that nymphing, it's all about like reading how your bugs are fishing, because every hole is different as well. Like you want it to tick bottom and be down around bottom, but also not get hung up to where you can get this free drift. And so finding that happy medium, it takes a lot of experience on the water to know what leader length, to know how much weight, to know that setup. But once you know that inside and out, you can go anywhere in the world and go catch fish. Like it is the most efficient way to fly fish. And so, man, you're speaking my language, Tyler. I love technical nymphing. Like it's definitely a lost art, and I see all these great fly fishermen that don't put in their time nymphing, and in turn, I don't think they know how to read the water as well, because they don't know where fish are sitting in those lines. I just think that those skills transpose to all different types of fly fishing, and it's necessary to learn how to nymph, man. It's so efficient and effective.
Well, it's absolutely 100% necessary. I've got, when we were just talking about mending, it's one of my favorite quotes. And I believe my own quote, because it was in a book called The Little Red Book of Fly Fishing by Kurt Dieter and Charlie Meyer. who was the editor of the Denver Post, and they quoted me on a bunch of segments in that book back in the day. But I used to always say, too much, too soon, too little, too late when I would teach clients to fish. And that was coming from a lot of us on the shoots, but, I spent a number of years guiding in Alaska, and those words can never be, more true. So, especially when you're nymph fishing, people throw it up, if they're facing the river at 12 o'clock, and they throw it up like at 3 o'clock. Well, that's not going to work. And then they're going to throw it up at 2 o'clock. Well, that's not really going to work either. So you really got to be about 1:30-ish, and then a lot of times you'll see them men too much. They'll throw too much up, and then they get too much drag, and then it's not bouncing the correct way. So that's what I would say, too much too soon. And then as soon as the line would get to them right at noon, then they would not mend enough, and that's what I would say, too little, too late. So too much too soon, too little, too late was one of my favorite quotes that I invented, I think, back in the day. And spending lots of time on the water, and that in turn happens in Alaska as well, right? So, when you're fishing in Alaska and you're guiding in Alaska, fly fishing, if you don't know how to nymph fish, well, you ain't catching any fish. And, at least when the feeds are going on, if, you can fish streamers, and you can fish dry flies in parts of Alaska, and you can swing for fish, which is probably one of my favorite things to do in Alaska by all means. But, it's a really good nymph fisherman going to Alaska, when the sockeye are running and they start their spawn, you can rail fish, and that's one of those things that I even all the years I spent there and the clients that I had from all over the world, from different walks of life, the majority of them were pretty wealthy individuals, and a lot of them were well accomplished fly fishermen. A lot of them still didn't know how to nymph that well either, and it really, I think, in the years I was a guide, almost 10 years, 11 years as a fly fishing guide, I could probably count on one hand the number of clients that were actually good casters, and that could get it, right? It's like you could put them in a run and say, hey, walk through this run, spot rainbows for them, there's one, and they could throw out their bead setup with their nymph and just dead drift it perfect, and you wouldn't have to tell them anything else, but there was, and for people that want to learn about slackline nymphing, John Judy was a well-known guide on the shoots for a long time. He was out of the Metolius River, Camp Sherman, and John wrote the book Slackline Nymphing, and that's really what we did, and that's what you had to really, if you wanted to be part of that crowd that could actually catch fish on the big river like the shoots, you better learn how to slackline nymph, and that's exactly what it was. It was 20 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet, stack a few mins, and don't put too much out, and don't put, not enough, and then learn how to do it, and learn how to fish effectively and cover a big section of water. You can cover, 50, 60 feet really effectively, and then I just, wherever I'm at, just walk with it, cast again, walk, and I can cover a section of the river with nymphs really fast. And then if I know there's trout there, for instance, or steelhead, but trout in particular, then I would just switch my flies and go back up and look and then change it again and go back through it. And, but particularly, when it comes to steelhead. But when you were talking about fishing, for steelhead on the peninsula, what you were doing, we see a lot of guys do now out here, probably the last 15, 20 years, with the centerfin fishing from Canada. And you watch a guy with a centerfin rod on a steelhead stream, and it's downright filthy, and, it's very, very technical, very, very artsy, very hard, to do. And, when you get somebody that knows what you're doing with a centerfin, you run a drennan float, jigs, flies, whatever, they can absolutely pound the hell out of the water. And, it's really exciting to watch them, get caught on that reel, because that reel's got no drag. So I don't know if you know what centerfin is or not, but it's essentially, what you were attempting to do with like a mini spey rod and some floating line and, drifting it out. The centerfin stuff is, you could sit in your boat in a centerfin and fish 100 yards.
Yeah, those centerpin guys are good. I've watched them fish. Yep. I fished next to him with spey rods. Yeah. It's even catching on like the Missouri. I see centerpin guys. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, and I'll use my spay rod for trout fishing too. Like on the Missouri, you can just reach so much further and fish. Like instead of 100-foot drift, I can do a 300-foot drift, and I've got 12.5 foot of rod to reach that fish when he hits it too. It's so efficient, and it's so efficient, like getting your mends and everything staged the way you want. But yeah, man, you're definitely speaking my language, and it's funny how you say you just had a handful of guys that could really command a fly rod. The male ego gets in the way a little bit. You'll run into guys and they'll tell you about all the great fishing they've done and all the places they've been, but the truth of the matter is when you watch a guy cast a fly rod and throw his drift out there, instantly you know what his skill level is. He can't fake it. You can't fake it. You can't hide it. Like I can watch somebody cast a rod and I instantly know what their skill level is. And it's not something you can learn in a day, a week, a month, or even a year. Like it's years of really committing to the craft to be able to get to that level, to command a fly rod like that. And there's very few guys that do, and I've got, a handful of good outfitter buddies that will really command a fly rod, but even some of the really good fishermen just still don't have command over that rod. But you can always tell, like you can't fake it. You can tell me all the stories you want, all the places you fish, but the truth is going to come out when I watch cast that rod.
Oh, yeah, I can see it in a second. All I have to do is watch your arm. I can just watch your arm. I don't have to look at the rod. I can just see your arm and your wrist, and I can tell right away. I mean, it immediately. And I see a lot of younger people nowadays, and a lot of people that want to get into sport, and they think they're good at it. And I'm like, you're way off base, And and obviously that's social media stuff nowadays and the influence behind that. But and if you really want to learn how to cast a fly rod, like where you grew up, where I grew up in Oregon, like you should be a steelhead fisherman. I mean, watch a guy with a single hander before his spay rod came along. If you want to be really good and to reach steelhead, and to fish the North Umpqua with a single hander was next level. I mean, that was the Super Bowl of steelhead fishing with a single hander, in the lower 48. And if you couldn't cast that line 90 feet, 100 feet, 105 feet, you were going to miss a bunch of spots, to where you could catch fish. And, did you have to cast that far all the time? I don't know. I mean, you could go 10 feet, 20 feet, doesn't matter. But, and I think that was an era of guys that knew how to cast, and spent time casting was, in that time frame before spay rods. And, Brian O'Keefe used to always say it best, he's one of the most well-respected people in the fly fishing industry and a good friend of mine, an author, photographer, former fly fishing guide. Brian's a great human. And Brian used to always say when spay rods really hit the market, and that would have been about 1998, somewhere around 99, 2000, 2001, they were really kind of teeing off, And, Brian used to always quote, a bunch of 40-foot casters couldn't be wrong. And if you have to understand Brian's humor, but I used to laugh so hard at that quote because a lot of that was right. There was a lot of people that couldn't cast a single hander. And, it would be easier to cast a bigger spay rod where you could just roll it out there and next thing you know, you're out there 100 feet, 150 feet and you're like, oh, this is awesome. But if you handle that person a single hander, and, where they go 40 feet, 50 feet. So, it was a crutch, I guess is the best way to put it. But a highly effective crutch too, especially when you're really good at it. So, and when you're fishing sink tips and heavy stuff, heavy flies, yeah, absolutely. Spay rod is, the key. It's the only way to do it. Big rivers, stuff like that. But, watching people fish single handers, and it's old school steelhead fishermen like Frank Moore on the North Umpqua, it's pretty cool, pretty beautiful to watch somebody be able to cast that far as a single hander on top of a rock, and just let it rip.
So unreal. So much skill involved, so many years of dedicating to the craft to be able to command a single hand rod like that. And they're at the elite level too. Yeah, I would just sit in awe and watch it, like that is amazing. But that's what it takes. Like if you want to be a really good fly fisherman, just like you stated in the beginning, commit to the craft, commit to your cast, and really work on it because it makes such a huge difference. And you spend all this money on, whether it's rods or gas or drift boats or guide fees or, you plan this big trip out west to go fly fishing. And then you don't practice your cast or practice the craft, which is the most important element of it, And so, like, it's definitely like so important and so fun to watch people that are really good. Like, you can have somebody tell you or give you instruction, but I fish with a bunch of different guides and outfitters, and to go with those guys, like I learn the most when I'm sitting back in the rower seat and I get to watch them command that rod, and some of the little moves they make I can pick up on and improve my own game. I fishing with a buddy the other day, fishing a streamer, and he'd throw this downstream mend after he casted his streamer in there, and like I started paying attention and thinking about it. And so now he's not just pulling a streamer from the bank to the boat. He's actually like laying his line to where it runs all the way down the seam. So now as he strips, he's covering 20 foot of seam instead of just pulling it back to the boat. And like that, just those little things that you can pick up from just watching and just watching really good fly fishermen and taking in information. And those spay rods, like they have gotten popularity and they're super effective, and I absolutely love them for steelhead and big rivers. But I'm finding like there's like on these rivers there's little niches that guys aren't getting, and so like a lot of guys will fish streamers from the boat and they'll pull them back in and they're fishing weighted lines, but these big deep heavy runs, they can't get down in them. You can't get down in one drift. Sure, you can throw upstream and dive it down, and there's some ways to get like good strips back. But what I'm finding is that I can take some of my steelhead tactics and I can tie on, one of Kelly Gallup's like big sex dungeons or whatever it is, and with that spay rod, I can stop and I can work these big runs like I'd work steelhead swinging. And I've also found that in colder water temperatures, the fish love to eat it on the swing far more than the strip, And so now I can get in these big runs. There's nobody doing it out west here, and I can cast my spay rod, swing it through, take 2 steps down river, swing it through, swing it through, swing it through. And man, you should see some of these trout that I'm hunting up just because it's like this different tactic that nobody's really using, And so, like, I just think it's so cool how you can, you can think outside the box, and that in turn you might find some epic fishing, and whatever that outside the box is. Like, a lot of times it's just paying attention to the river, and as you go down, pay attention to where you catch fish. Like I fished with my dad the other day, and it's a little bit like the water temp got up to 47 degrees. They were getting pretty grabby on streamers, which was good. But, I noticed we'd come into a run and I'm drawn to the heavy water that pushes against that side that's deep. And then there's pocket waters on the side. But that's not where we were catching them. Those are summer spots for those fish. Where we were catching them is you had to throw to the opposite side of the river to the slow inside bend. And the slow inside is where those fish wanted to be. And my point is that like you have to pay attention throughout the day where you're catching fish. So we'd catch them off those slow inside corners. So then we just stopped fishing that heavy water in those pockets, and we started focusing on the slow inside corners and then the tail outs of those runs, like a really similar to like where you'd catch steelhead, right? Because that's the water temp that they're running in. But once we started focusing on that water, it didn't matter how many boats were out there because they weren't fishing where we were fishing and what we were fishing. And so it, even though there was a few boats on the water, it was like we had it all to ourselves because we were focused on these insides and on the tail outs and on this water where those fish were sitting and eating. And so like, you have a plan. Like every fighter has a plan until they get punched in the face, and you have to be adaptable on these rivers. You have to play with, are they sitting on the drop off? Are they sitting in the front of the rocks? Are they sitting behind them? Are they sitting in the slow water, the tail outs? Like taking in all this information every day, processing it, and then coming up with your approach to that river for that day. And it adjusts throughout the day as the water temp warms up. Then, like I was fishing runs where soft inside was good and the water temperature will get to 49, 50 degrees, and all of a sudden you start finding those fish in the heavier water, So like I think it's one of the things that I love about fly fishing. It's just that you're constantly thinking and theorizing where those fish will be and what they're doing, and trying to figure it out, trying to solve the puzzle. And it doesn't happen every day, but boy, when you solve that puzzle, it sure is a fun payoff.
Yeah, it certainly is. This brings back lots of memories of fishing lots of different rivers through the years. And you hit the nail on the head about sometimes just, well, maybe they're over here today, because I was fishing right below Clark Canyon Reservoir there on the Beaverhead, and that was, oh my God, over 20 years ago. And that's when there was a huge percentage of those fish were still rainbows, and that was, I guess they find mostly browns today. That I was right below the dam, and it was probably, I would say, first part of August maybe, and there's nobody up there at the little campground. There's a put in right there too, and I just waited out at the boat launch, and there's one of these flies we used to use back on the shoots for lakes. It's called a rainbow bugger. It's just like a grizzly hackle, kind of a silver and green, woolly bugger, nothing fancy, bead head. And I literally did the same thing. I just cast out across the river. The river was low enough I could wade out a bunch, and it was a second where this fish just hammered it, and I was just swinging them like you were swinging to how would I call it? 8, 10 rainbows? I don't have to keep track of fish. I remember keeping track of fish 10 years ago, but it was a lot, and they were big, and the Beaverhead is always known for its big fish. And I laughed and laughed and laughed. My girlfriend was with me at the time, and there was no people up there at all. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "This is bizarre." I'm like, I've fished this river so much. I know the Beaverhead pretty well. I'm just fishing the most basic woolly bugger and just casting like fishing for steelhead. And it was an awesome experience. It's one I'll never forget, because it was just one of those aha moments, like, why are they eating this? And why are they eating this on a sling? And there's nobody up here, and there's a bunch of them, So it was a really cool Kodak moment, of course, without a camera. But those are days like that are ones you never forget, and that's probably the beauty of fly fishing. Is there's days like that where you're like, wow, that was a really cool experience.
That is the beauty of fly fishing. That's so cool, man. Yeah, and especially when you figure out something that nobody else is doing, and it just works like that. Like, those are the magical days. Those are the payoff days, man. Well, Tyler, it has been so fun connecting with you. We got to stay in touch, and you've got to make a trip back out here to Montana to hit some of this water that you hit in the 90s. So I've got my drift boat out here. Just make a run out this summer, and let's do some fishing.
Yeah, I certainly will be. I was just there for some work stuff, and then I'll be back probably some middle of May, maybe. Right when the stuff starts to probably be runoff. But it just depends. I think you guys got a lot of snowpacks, so maybe your runoff will be typical July or into June. I don't know. But yeah, no, I'd love to, absolutely. And at any time I need to come back on, I got lots of funny stories. There's lots of guide stories in the years that we could talk about, people casting in mistakes and bears and all sorts of other stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, we hardly scratched the surface with you, Tyler. You fished so much and so many great experiences, dude. I'd love to have you back on. So yeah, let's shoot me a message when you're up in May, and we'll see if we can't find a river to get on, and then I'll definitely hit you up in the future, man. It's just such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on, and then just being so forthright with your insight to fly fishing, as it really helps the audience, So yeah, man, just can't thank you enough, and really happy to connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Tell everybody to learn how to cast. Learn how to cast.
I like that. That's a good closing statement. So thanks, buddy.
Learn
Appreciate
how to cast, it. And too much, too soon, too little, too late. There's my favorite quote, Brian. There you go.
Oh, I'm writing that one on my hand today, so I don't forget it. I love that quote.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, there you go. All right, thanks, Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, bye.
All right, that's a wrap. Fun conversation with Tyler. He loves to fish. Got great insight into it, too. It was really fun, like comparing notes of these different rivers from 20 years ago when he was really fishing them hard, or 15. I don't want to date us or anything, but from years ago fishing these same systems. It's just amazing. There's still great opportunity out there. Like I say, I've been fishing all spring on different systems and exploring a bunch of different systems and doing new drifts. And gosh, I just love that adventure of it. And then, I've caught a bunch of really nice fish. I've struck out too, like that's part of the game, but caught a bunch of really nice fish, and I've caught them on streamers and nymphing and dry flies. And so it's just been an amazing season so far for me. Can't wait for summertime and keep chasing some of these new rivers and new locations and see what I can do. So trying to keep up right now. We've got 4 sports going for the girls. So we've got traveling sports. We're traveling volleyball and traveling softball and things of that nature. So trying to help out and do my part and run these kids around so they can do all their sports. But I always squeeze in a little bit of fishing here and there. So I didn't get out last weekend. But yeah, hopefully can get out an evening or two this week and keep chasing that dry fly hatch I was telling you guys about. So amazing to watch those big browns come up on those betas like that and set myself up right and then give them the right drift. And you make one mistake and they're on to you and don't eat. But man, I mean, in just the fight of my life, like I like to fish heavy leaders, so I don't fish the light tippet very often. But this is a gen clear stream, and so I've got to fish like this 4X, and they're super spooky, like really long leaders, 12 and 14-foot leaders that I'm building for these things. Because once you cast over them or spook them, they won't eat it. And so just getting my system all dialed in and then sneak up on this rising trout and kind of see what his feeding lane is and then put that fly just right in front of him and watch him come up and grab it and then wait for the hook set and then there he is. And then, man, I just had the fight of my life on those things. Like I've caught a couple fish that are like 22 to 24 on the dry fly. You talk about an insane fight on 4X. Oh my gosh. I mean, running downstream, trying to keep pressure on them and trying to get them by rocks and they're out of the water. It's just been crazy cool. It's like the funnest thing. It's like magic when you find it and nobody else onto it too, which is super cool. So, man, there's a lot of opportunity out there. I know I'm having fun this spring and can't wait for this summer to get after them and do some of that wet wading, and my shorts or quick drying pants, and man, it'll just be super fun. Can't wait. Thanks again to Avid Max for their support of the podcast. Thanks to you guys for listening in. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Tyler Palmerton for taking the time, jumping on the podcast, and sharing insight into fly fishing. So with that, that's the episode, you guys. I'll check in with you here in 2 weeks.